Just Hello, everyone, and Nikki, thank you for the introduction. Welcome today to the Lunch and Learn that's being provided by TriNet. We are so excited to be able to have the conversation today, and something that's incredibly important, especially in a post-COVID, semi-still COVID world. But the concept of cultivating a culture of DEI in a complex world is something that is very vital, especially moving forward. So we're so thankful to have TriNet providing this information in the Lunch and Learn today. So I am the Director of Talent and Policy here at South Florida Tech Hub. So we are very fortunate to be able to have an impact from Martin County all the way down to Miami-Dade County. And so our mission, as you can see, is to continue to build South Florida's tech hub with a vision of becoming a globally recognized innovation hub. So we do this in a wide variety of different ways. And I think it's something that's really important. We just want to highlight, because I know some of you may not be familiar with Tech Hub. So we wanted to give this brief little overview before we jump right into the meat of the Lunch and Learn. So some of our members, we have over 250 member organizations. And so they range, as you can see, all the way from Office Depot to AWS to TriNet, UKG, all the way down to a startup level. And I think that's something that's really unique from an association perspective, that we have the ability to bridge those gaps and bring the full community together. So it's something that we're really proud of, to be able to represent everyone. So we do have four core initiatives. So talent, as I mentioned before, this is something that I help to oversee. In order to have a robust tech hub, you have to have the talent to facilitate that. So we have subcommittees from a K through 12 boot camp and higher education perspective that enable us to connect talent to companies and vice versa, so that there is the awareness that companies have that the talent's there, but also too, we want to retain that top talent here in South Florida as well. So we have an obligation to bring that awareness of the companies as well to the students and alumni. So brand, to have the ability to attract businesses and also talent, and just understand that Tech Hub is more than just South Florida, is something that is not just tourism, that we are growing, that we're a tech community, that we're vibrant. And so that's one of our initiatives, our mission and initiatives, to be able to promote that. Community is something that's very important to us as well, because in order to continue to grow together, to connect with those within the community from a professional perspective, mentorship perspective, leader perspective, is a really great way. And then also, of course, startups. So to be able to facilitate startup growth and help them move to the next level is something that we take very seriously as well. We have member peer groups. So once a member is a part of Tech Hub, so if your company is not a part of Tech Hub, this is something that is offered to those that are. So if your company is a member of Tech Hub and you have the ability to join one of these peer groups that's listed here, to have in-depth conversations, the ability to network with people, and be a part of the further development of all these important aspects of different ways to engage from a tech perspective, all the way from talent and culture to the C-suite executives with the CXO councils, and so many more. We also have committees as well, as I mentioned, and you can see them as they spread throughout. So this is something that we feel encompasses all of the things that are necessary to continue to grow and develop like we do. So this is also another thing that members have access to as well, if they or their employees would like to participate on the committees. So for the membership, these are some of the benefits that are included. I've already mentioned several of them, but obviously the weekly newsletter, speaking opportunities, including panel abilities. There are resume distributors, job listings, so many events that are educational and also get you the opportunity to develop your network as well. So there's just an endless amount of opportunities to take advantage of being a member of Tech Hub. Here are the annual memberships and how those are presented. And this information is also on the website. And here are some of our signature events. We do tech talks every week on Mondays, and they're very fun, educational, if you think of a TEDx style as well. Community coffees, those are something that are a really fun way to bring people together. We have a podcast and then lunch and learns, as you can see, with a lot of other events dispersed in as well. Our resume distributor is also something that I mentioned before that's really helpful, so that you can do that directly on our website, and you can have that be distributed to all of the member companies. And then there's also great ways to engage in the communications through Slack, as well as that newsletter that was mentioned before. So if you are interested, then this is a great way to do it. So from an exciting perspective, now we are really thrilled to be able to co-host this Lunch and Learn today with the TriNet team. Christine, Claire, and the entire organization have been really helpful in making this happen. And so, as I mentioned before, from the concept of how we can really engage in this conversation of DEI and do it in a way that's thoughtful is something that's super crucial. So Christine is the Executive Director of Talent and Organizational Management at TriNet, and Claire Virtue is the Lead Organizational Development Consultant. So I will stop sharing my screen and pass it over to Claire and Christine. However, if you do have any additional questions about Tech Hub, definitely just let either myself or Nikki know. We're really excited to be here today and can't wait to hear from Christine and Claire.
Beautiful. Love it. Love it. Well, welcome everybody. So nice to be here with you. I am speaking from Southern California. So it is morning here in Southern California. But Claire and I are just thrilled to be here having a conversation that really does matter. And so can everybody see my screen okay? Am I sharing my screen?
No, not yet.
No, not yet.
Oh, it's not showing? Okay, let's try that again then. All right, bear with me. Oh, goodness. Not sharing at all. You should be able to see it now, yeah?
Can see it now, correct.
Okay, beautiful. All right. So just before a quick disclaimer, before we dig in, that this presentation is for educational purposes only. We provide HR guidance and best practices. This is not meant to be any kind of legal, tax, or accounting advice. And the presentation that we'll be sharing today is Claire and I. Our background and experience doesn't necessarily represent the opinions of TriNet. So with that legal disclaimer out of the way, let me share just for a moment about our great company, TriNet. We are what is called a professional employer group, or PEO, if you may have heard the term. And what we do is we provide HR expertise, outsourced HR expertise. So we do payroll, we do benefits, we help with risk mitigation and compliance, all those things that aren't necessarily so fun to do as a small to medium-sized business. But we're pretty excited about what we're up to. We've been in business for 30 years. We have over 600,000 worksite employees that we partner with and 23,000 companies and great clients. So that's a little bit about us and what we're up to. We're also very passionate about talent, and certainly our topic today. We're going to be starting out just in terms of the agenda, the landscape this afternoon. We'll be, first of all, kind of taking a look at the macro trends, just briefly getting present to what's going on in the workforce that is impacting people right now. And it keeps changing, right? We keep changing, and the world is getting more and more chaotic in some ways. So we'll talk about what is DEI? What do we even mean by DEIB? And then we'll look at the components of a strong program, hopefully give you some really great takeaways for your organization, no matter what size you might be. I hope there's some really great ideas here. So looking at the trends, first of all, and we're all very familiar with these. Of course, the pandemic has really created somewhat of a paradigm shift in many ways. One of those is certainly the flexible work environment. We're seeing so many organizations that made the shift because of COVID, and now they've seen how productive it can be, and flexibility has become really the new imperative in organizations. The one we'll be diving into today is, I love how Deloitte coined the term humanization. It truly is a focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion for all. And in fact, you may have heard the statistic from Glassdoor, 2/3 of people that are looking for jobs out there are making it a priority to choose companies that are diverse, equitable, and inclusive. And so it is, again, become very much of a strategic and competitive priority for organizations to focus on DEI. Employee well-being is another topic we're hearing so much about. Organizations are really having to focus on balance, work-life balance. There's so much stress. There's so much that people feel they cannot control. And so it has really caused us to focus on the well-being of our employees. And then finally, of course, we've all heard about it. We've probably been part of it, is the Great Resignation. 25% higher rate of resignation in organization as opposed to pre-pandemic times. So all of these kind of macro trends combined together, the bottom line is that there's more focus on employees. There needs to be more focus on employees than ever before. And so what that means for tech, of course, is that we do need to make some shifts, some bold changes if we want to attract and keep the right people. So let's turn our focus now to DEIB. And what in the world do we mean by DEIB? Claire?
Yes, thank you, Christine. Hi, everybody. I'm Claire. Very, very happy to be with you all today. But yes, DEIB. So these words are absolutely buzzwords in the corporate world and beyond. But what does DEIB really mean, and why is it important? You know, the first thing that you might notice is the B at the end of DEI, and the B stands for belonging. And the reason that we use this is there really is far more emphasis on fostering belonging in the workplace than ever before. We believe that that belonging is really where the magic happens. But what does diversity, equity, and inclusion mean? So diversity, it really is those differences and similarities that we all bring to the table in experience, perspective, physical attributes, demographic attributes like race, gender, gender identity, ethnicity, national origin, and just our unique past and present. Equity, it's really about providing fair opportunities for everyone. It doesn't always mean that you provide the same opportunities for everyone, but providing what each person really needs to be successful in their role. Equity really requires that employers recognize barriers and also advantages. Inclusion is about seeing people's different experiences and perspectives and not only accepting them, but really warmly welcoming them, encouraging them, and celebrating them, our unique differences. And then belonging, it really is that sense of security and support that you feel. It's a sense of belonging is created when employees trust that there really is some psychological safety for them to be their authentic selves at work and feel appreciated for their contributions. So belonging really is the goal of DEIB efforts. You might appreciate this little example. So there's a popular saying, right? So diversity is being invited to the party. Inclusion is being asked to dance, right? It could be a bit of an oversimplification, but the sentiment is on point, except that I would add inclusion is being asked to dance to music that reflects your taste. And then belonging really drives it home, because belonging means you feel comfortable enough to show your own crazy dance moves, or even say, hey, I don't feel like dancing. So DEIB really requires an integrated approach, right? If you focus just on recruiting practices alone, without focusing on building a real inclusive culture, your efforts really could fail. It means involving your entire organization, including and especially leadership. DEIB is not a program, it's a strategy. And it's an organizational transformation process that takes time. You will hear us say a few times in this presentation that DEIB really is a journey. So just kind of framing it that way. So we'd like to take a moment and just hear from our audience. We have a poll question. Want to get to know you a little bit. So I think, Nikki, excellent. Poll question number 1, where is your organization on the DEIB journey? 1, we're just getting started. 2, we have a couple initiatives we're working on. 3, it's a top priority. And 4, we have a mature strategy. So just take a quick moment and pop that in. Nikki, did that one go through? Did that one pop up for everybody?
I'm not seeing the poll question yet, Nikki. I'm not sure if.
Oh, I'm sorry. Give me 1 second.
Okay.
Let me try this one more time. Let's see. Sorry. For some reason, it is only allowing me to do, even though I did the 3 questions, it looks like it's showing all of them together.
It's okay. We could maybe ask folks to pop them in the chat. So just briefly again, if you wouldn't mind just popping it into the chat. Oh, I see something popped up.
Maybe we just answer the first
Yeah, it's
one.
still not separating them, but it's showing all 3 questions.
Gotcha. Okay.
So just vote on the first. Just vote on the first one, right?
Let's try that.
You could do that. You can just do that. Start with the first question.
I think
I see some answers coming in.
You see some answers. Tell us what you see.
am I the only one that's not able to submit unless all 3 are answered?
I had to answer them all to submit. Okay.
Yeah.
It may make us do that. Yeah.
Okay. Just one.
Gotcha.
Oh yeah, that's what Jackie's saying too. Yeah.
Okay. Well, do we want to maybe just put these in the chat instead?
However you'd like to do it.
Great. Why don't folks just on this first question, where is your organization on the DEIB journey? Just chat it in. Just getting started, a couple initiatives, top priority, or a mature strategy. All right. Claire, I'll let you read those off since I'm presenting.
Gotcha. Okay, so
do you want me to end the poll on the screen, Claire?
Sure.
Has everybody got all of them? Okay.
Yeah. Got one top priority. Anybody else feel to share? No pressure. Yeah, and I mean, that is kind of something as well. There can be some pressure, right? Around this initiative, and it's really okay. Every organization really is in their own unique place in relation to their own DEIB efforts. So Don't feel bad. Just getting started. Excellent. And it's a top priority. I love it.
Yeah, that's great.
Okay.
Yeah.
Are we able to go back to your presentation, Christine?
Oh,
Can we end the poll, Nikki?
Did it bump me out?
I think Nikki might need to end the poll. There we go. Let's see. Although your screen, gotcha.
We good?
We are good. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about some statistics. That there really is a vast body of research out there that shows that focusing on DEIB is a win-win, both for individuals and for organizations. One of the statistics that we'll highlight here is from McKinsey & Company. They did a global study of more than 1,000 companies in 15 different countries, and they found that diverse and inclusive organizations are 37% more likely to outperform on profitability. That's quite something. Deloitte says that 83% of millennials are more likely to be actively engaged if they believe their company stimulates a diverse and inclusive culture. And then Built-in says more than 3 out of 4 workers prefer diverse companies. And yet, while a significant amount of progress has been made, things are still far from perfect. In fact, there's a report, a global culture report by O.C. Tanner that says 44% of employees say that their organization's DEI efforts feel insincere, while even fewer, 34%, feel that they're actually effective or believe that inclusion is part of their culture. So we can see there's definitely still work to be done. But on a positive note and really the brighter side, let's take a look at some dynamic shifts in DEIB and what we're seeing out there. So from an organizational perspective, there really has been some significant shifts over the past few years. DEIB has evolved into an entirely new mindset and outlook. So for example, DEIB objectives really has gone from counting people, things like focusing on demographics, focusing on ethnicity, gender, age, how many of these various groups do we have, to making people count, to really focusing on the human element, focusing on that sense of belonging. Engagement, we're seeing engagement from all levels of the organization. And it's really gone from a sentiment of, it's not my fight, it's not my job, I won't get in the way of it, but it's not really my responsibility, to we're seeing people become real active participants, right? They're taking ownership and becoming advocates for diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. They really want to see a dismantling of inequitable systems or policies in the workplace. So everybody's getting involved, which is wonderful. Outcomes as well, less focused on a one and done, right? It's a move, it's not a moment. So things like that before were check the box exercises, like making sure our training was done, things like that, to really being woven into the fabric of the culture, right? It's an ongoing transformation. It's a movement. It's a journey, not just a moment in time where you complete a particular training. So now that we've identified the then and now, let's discuss a little bit about where we start, Christine.
Where do we start? Yeah, some pretty compelling statistics. So a few things to be thinking about. First of all, you want to define your vision. And that really starts with, well, first of all, it starts with leadership. It is important that leadership is at the center and really authentically and sincerely interested and committed. We'll talk a little bit about that in a bit here, but in terms of defining the vision, it is critical to start with why. And Claire, you're going to share a story about a client you worked with, and this was really compelling for them, was really from the inside out, determining why does this even matter to us as an organization? And then that's going to be what helps keep the focus. If that's not there, if there's not a strong why, if it is that check the box that you talked about, Claire, then the organization will drift, the effort will drift. So beginning with why, establishing some really clear, simple goals, even SMART goals, making sure they're specific, measurable, timely, all of that. Building accountability. Another reason that these efforts can fail is if there isn't a sense of accountability, if there isn't executive sponsorship, if folks are not bought in. So making sure that you have established accountability and, of course, stakeholder buy-in, right? It's all about enrolling people in the vision. So it's consistently talking about it and making sure that you have a really actionable plan. So looking at the various components, there are quite a few components to a successful DEI program. And, it can kind of feel overwhelming. And so you don't have to do all of these, but the idea for those that might be just beginning the journey is to really start small and to build from there. So some of these components, first of all, it's important to collect data. Now, our organization does a DEI survey for the leaders, and then we also do one at that employee level, but you can also conduct interviews, any kind of listening channels that your organization has. Make sure that you're asking questions. How is it that people feel? What is their experience? What are examples of how they feel a sense of diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging at your organization? So collect the data, create a listening channel, and then of course you want to focus in on building an inclusive culture. It's critical, especially now. People want to be part of inclusive organizations. And I remember years ago, the Gallup organization, they have 10 questions you may be familiar with. And one of those is, do you feel a sense of belonging in your work? Do you have a friend at work? So that inclusive environment, really feeling like you belong, is critical in the organization. We'll talk a little bit more about that one in a minute. Recruiting practices, another critical area. People are looking for organizations that have DEI in all of their practices and all of their talent practices. And so recruiting is crucial. That's the first impression. You want to make sure that you're embedding DEI and B in that whole process. And then employer branding, of course, is critical. People are going to check you out online before they ever meet you. And so it's important to embed DEI-B practices throughout your brand, right? Everything that's represented, client-facing, should tell the story to employees, customers as well. And then our talent processes, also a critical, making sure that you're embedding that in every phase of your employee experience. And then I cannot see the last one. What is the last one?
Training and development.
Training and development. Thank you. I've got your pictures on the side there. Training and development, also critical, right? We've got to make sure that we're equipping people with the right skills. We're empowering, we're unleashing really good behaviors, mindsets, and habits. You can do that through training, but as Claire kind of mentioned earlier, these are all kind of integrated. You don't want to just focus on training. You want to focus on all of these things to create the conditions for success. All right, double dive, kind of leaning into this notion of inclusive culture. I want to camp out a little bit here. I found the Better Up statistic really, really compelling. Fostering belonging can lead to a 50% lower risk of turnover. So it's obvious. We've talked about it. It is critical to make sure that you're cultivating a culture of belonging. And how do you do that? What do we even mean? What are the elements of belonging? Well, some of the things that there's basically 4 elements of what it is that creates that sense of belonging for people. First of all, they feel seen. They feel like their voices are heard. They feel seen. They feel respected. They feel acknowledged. Secondly, they feel connected. They have a best friend at work, right? They have people that care about them. They feel connected in the environment. There's opportunities to socialize, to build relationships. So that connection is really, really vital. And this is what we're seeing is a little bit more challenging in a hybrid or remote environment. A lot of companies are struggling with making sure that people feel connected. So again, a critical focus area. Supported. People feel a sense of belonging when they know that they're supported by their peers, by their bosses, by other leaders in the organization. And then proud. They feel a sense of connection to the mission, the vision, the purpose of the company. They feel like what they're up to really does matter. And so we have to ask ourselves, how are we cultivating these things in our organizations? How are employees feeling? Do they feel seen, connected, supported? Do they feel proud of what it is they're up to? And if not, we need to make sure that we're creating initiatives to create those conditions for folks. 54% of tech employees say that they feel a sense of belonging at work. Now, that's not terrible, but it's also not great. Consider that only half of the employees in the organization feel that they have a sense of belonging. So there's the stats.
Christine,
So, yeah.
Sorry to interrupt you. We have really one good question. I think it was actually just 2 slides before, was Monique had asked, so how do you she said, how do you suggest including this in your brand if you're focused on helping just African-American girls or any other organization with a primary focus on a certain demographic, so it doesn't cause confusion on being together versus like separate?
Well, if I understand the question, how do you do this in the brand? I think what you do is you tell stories of the importance of diversity, equity, and inclusion. It sounds like it's an organization that already is very, very focused. But I would say that when we say really focusing on your employer brand, it's making sure anything that's facing the public or your customers includes diversity, equity, and inclusion. So it includes a diverse perspective, right? It's in your newsletters, it's in your blogs, it's in your podcasts. The folks that you bring onto your podcast very much aligns with your commitment and your focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion.
And I think, and I say, Monique, feel free to take yourself off mute if you want to clarify, but I think the question was more of when we're talking about overall diversity and inclusion. I know we're talking about Black, brown, Asian, male, female, LGBT, but if you have an organization that's focused just on, I think in her example is like Black girls, then how do you show diversity and inclusion when you have such a focused niche market, if I'm saying that right, Monique?
So
that's correct. I just, for many, sorry.
Go ahead, Monique, please.
Yes, so many organizations that I work with, they all have different primary focuses, and sometimes it causes confusion to outside people. The people inside the organization understand, but if our brochures may only show African American girls because that's the niche, what would you suggest, like, to make sure people know that we haven't forgotten about the importance of these components, but we do have a primary purpose of focusing on the one particular target?
Yeah.
So one quick thing I would say is focusing on your careers page in relation to how you view what your kind of commitment is to DEI internally. Perhaps on your careers page, you could advertise essentially what your organization's promises around DEI. And we definitely work with organizations a lot that have their primary purposes are in kind of niche areas. But as you continue to listen to the rest of the presentation, it doesn't negate kind of an employer's obligation or to consider all the questions. Still consider, do you have any internal biases that maybe you need to shift, or is there a particularly good question for your organization? So there's a couple slides coming up that I think would be helpful. But Christine.
Yeah, I haven't had that question before. I think it's such an interesting question, but I keep thinking how important it is to represent widely, right? Diversity is diversity of background, age. I think because you are so targeted, anything you can do to expand that, you know, even in your pictures and your photos and to be more inclusive is what comes to my mind as well. Were you going to say something, Claire?
Oh,
okay. All right. Well, let's move on. Thank you for that. I love the question, Monique. Thank you. So let's talk a little bit about what does it mean to be an inclusive leader. And this might be something that you focus on in terms of your training, making sure that you're training managers and leaders. I love this. This is actually from the Harvard Business Review. What leaders say and do makes up to a 70% difference as to whether an individual reports feeling included. Again, so compelling, 70%. Leaders are critical, and they are, you know, it's just so important that they are sincerely and authentically committed to this. They show their visible commitment, right? They're not afraid to stand up, to speak out. Hopefully the organization has some type of purpose statement that the leaders were involved in, they can get behind. They also have humility. I love this, this kind of admitting that they don't have all the answers, admitting that we all have biases, that they have biases, and being open about that and being vulnerable with where they're at, that they don't, again, we all have blind spots, but that humility really endears us to leaders. They have a curiosity about others. They aren't afraid to say, tell me more, right? They're curious, they want to understand people from all different backgrounds. And so they take the time to say, tell me more, tell me about you. Makes people feel so incredible. Think of it, I know for me, it makes me feel incredible when people say, I want to understand that more, tell me more. They also have a cultural intelligence. They're aware and they're culturally aware, and they celebrate that in the organization. They have an awareness of bias. I kind of mentioned that earlier. They really know that they don't have all the answers, that we all have biases, and to speak very openly about that. And then they also really promote and foster effective collaboration. They don't just let things happen. They really promote collaboration, making sure voices are heard, and that people have an opportunity to really work in a connected way. All right, we are going to skip the next poll question, and I think what we'll do is move over to talking a little bit about the talent process, Claire.
Gotcha. Okay, cool. Yep. So recruiting really does require a DEIB lens and a people-centric approach right from the very beginning. It's important that people feel seen, heard, and valued from the moment they interact with your company, right? So what can you do? Here's a couple things to consider. Potentially looking for niche diversity sites and networks that reach a diverse audience, maybe veterans, for example. Making really good use of your applicant tracking system and tools. Perhaps they include software that has masking of personal information off of resumes. That would help decrease bias in recruiting. Another one is really involving people from different levels of the organization, different departments in the organization in the process, so that you have a lot of perspectives from different members of the team. People love great stories, right? We relate to good stories. So showcasing your employer brand by telling good stories. And providing training for your hiring teams. Certainly, training can boost awareness and advocacy, really help stakeholders become more culturally competent, empathetic, and self-aware. And so these are, the fundamental courses, as well as things like psychological safety, microbehaviors, unconscious bias. Built-in has a stat as well that mentions previously that less than half of tech companies actually have leadership-led approved goals for diversity hiring. So there is some work to do. So let's look a little bit at some of the unintended unconscious biases that exist in the hiring practice. There are a lot. honestly, there's upwards of 170 biases. We're going to look at 4 of them just to make sure that you have an idea of a few. And because biases, whether they're unconscious or not, they can have negative consequences. So awareness of them can really help alleviate the possibility of having them influence your hiring decisions. First one is the name bias, right? So that's just the tendency to judge or prefer people with a certain type of sounding name. It's a preference for somebody based on their first or last name that impacts your decision making. Another one is called the affinity bias or similarity bias. This one's a tough one. And that's an unconscious tendency to favor people who are just like you, right? It might show up by choosing candidates maybe who went to the same school as you, grew up in the same area, but it really has nothing to do with their ability to do the job. Yeah. So, hiring people who look, talk, or act like you, it really can be an easy trap to fall into. So it's good to be able to identify it head on. Conformity bias. This one's tough too. It's where you allow peer pressure to affect your hiring decisions. Happens often in group interviews where a hiring manager just goes with the flow. They choose who everybody else wants instead of choosing who they think is best to do that particular job. And then a negative emphasis bias is judging someone negatively based on really irrelevant information. Maybe things like their height, their weight, their hairstyle. All of this is based on cultural ideals and holds no indication of how well an employee would be able to do the job. So, and then when posting job descriptions, right? So it's also important to position job descriptions and job postings in a way that's inclusive to all. So looking towards the next slide, some tips here as well is use gender neutral language. So instead of he and she, perhaps use you, them, or they. Avoid gender coding. So there are words that kind of historically have been associated with either more masculine or feminine attributes, right? So use words that are not gender coded. So instead of businessman, business person, right? And doing that will really bring a broader base to that job. And don't unintentionally exclude people with physical disabilities as well. So instead of focusing on how they do their job, so, you might have seen in job postings before, must be able to lift 50 pounds, lifting being the operable word there. So instead of focusing on the how they do it, maybe say something like moves equipment up to 50 pounds, not focusing on how it's done, but just really focusing on what needs to get done. Watch your company's jargon or lingo as well. Many candidates have transferable skills from other industries, but they assume they don't convert based on the language that you use. So just be aware of that. Also, really consider what you put on your job posting as a must-have. Is that bachelor's degree really required? Is it an absolute requirement for the role? If so, why? I really encourage all of you to go back and look at job descriptions to make sure that bachelor's degree and years of experience are a requirement. Instead, really focus creating job postings around abilities, what the person has to do, what you need from them, expectations, the ability to plan a profit and loss statement, things like that, right? So the bottom line here is employees really want to see that organizations have a clear and thoughtful approach to DEIB efforts. So shall we do the poll or shall we go to, okay.
I think I'm mindful of our time. I'd love to story though, Claire. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Sure. So just a quick customer story of a customer I was working with lately that highlights a couple of things. Number one is that DEIB really is a journey. You will likely experience some great momentous advancement. Feels great. And then you'll have some periods of slowness, and that is okay. What's really most important is, the impact of the work. Is it effective? Is it meaningful? Is everybody along for the ride? So we met with an organization in Colorado that at first glance, they really seemed so far along in their journey. They had a framework put together, they had goals, lists of activities, but their efforts were falling flat. Employees didn't seem engaged with the movement. So one of the things that we asked first is, do you have a DEI purpose statement? So that purpose statement is the organization's authentic promise or commitment to DEI efforts. It's usually a compelling statement that engages hearts and minds. And they did not have one of those created already. And quite frankly, they were worried that creating one at the executive level would fall on deaf ears and perhaps be just another tick the box exercise. So we decided to engage the entire staff in creating a purpose statement. So we went in, the first exercise we did with them was essentially asking them as individuals, why is DEIB important to you personally? And then the second question is, why is it important to this organization? And so based on their unique feedback, we had a really beautiful, authentic conversation with the organization and the staff. And ultimately, they created what they call "we believe" statements. And it really connected employees to the why, right? Why is this important to me at all? Why is this important to our organization? And because we did that, all of the efforts after that, which, ultimately we needed to activate their why, right? Create action around these "we believe" statements, which we have done. But now everybody's on the bus. We've engaged hearts and minds. They were a part of the process. It's now personal for them. And it was really great for the organization. So that was just a good testament to really knowing the why, and also knowing that DEIB is a journey.
Yeah, I love that leadership decided to have everyone have a seat at the table too. I mean, that itself sends a message that this is important to us, and listening, right? We want to hear what this means to you. So what a just a neat process. Yeah, really great experience. Yeah, I love that. I love that. All right, well, let's wrap up. Before we do that, I thought you might find this interesting. This is a study that Built-In did in 2022, actually, about the most popular DEI investments in tech. I thought this was interesting. The first is intentionally sourcing diverse candidates. We chatted about that. Robust DEI training programs, collecting and reporting on DEI metrics. We're starting to see a lot of tech folks and businesses really starting to look at the metrics, which is great. Establishing mentorship for underrepresented groups. And then finally, inclusion tactics, which is a bit general, but really focusing though on inclusion, which is great. So, all right. So wrapping all this, kind of tying it up with a pretty bow, basically, here's a few things and a few key takeaways. First of all, listen from the heart, be real, be authentic. Most of all, really listen from a place, see the human in one another. Establish a clear vision that really gives voice to your commitment. And again, that can be very small. It can be starting with what Claire mentioned, a simple purpose statement. What does all this mean to each individual in the organization? Cultivate curiosity. Again, be a stand for really wanting to know people, ask them to tell you more, really listen and really care. Show your own vulnerability, making sure that, none of us is perfect. We all have blind spots. We all have biases. We're all in this together. when we can be vulnerable and share our own sense of just our own blind spots, it really gives permission for others as well. And then invite many voices, lift many voices, and more importantly, and most importantly, do something. Just get started. If you know, no matter where you are on that journey, this is an invitation to do something. And then I think finally, we wanted to just, is there any questions in the chat? And then I want to show, we have a couple of resources available we want to tell you about, but any questions that we can answer, anything that has come in?
I don't think I see any questions in the chat, just a couple of comments.
Great, super.
Appreciation comments, yeah.
Nice.
I had a question.
I was just going to ask
earlier.
Zach if you had one.
Yeah, I had a question earlier, and I was just interested in your guys' perspective because I'm sure that you have many of these conversations. I'm looking to my screen to see what I wrote, but in regards to well-being and employee churn, how do you drive the importance of this from a business profitability perspective with senior leaders that you're speaking with? And I'm saying this because I know sometimes companies see HR engagement and well-being more as cost centers as opposed to something that could really impact the bottom line. So I'm assuming that some of those conversations are initially those check the box, but how can you show like, hey, if you make some of these changes, you'll help to improve your employee retention or impact the employee experience, which will improve the productivity. How do you go about those conversations and initially selling it?
Such a great question, Zachary. You want to take that, Claire?
A couple things come to mind. The first thing I think of is just making sure senior leadership is thoroughly aware of the situation, of what's really happening in the organization. I think often the message doesn't trickle all the way upwards. So really making an effort to make sure the message gets to the right person. And then I would say partner as well with an executive sponsor so that they can provide kind of guidance to the leadership team. There is a wealth of information and statistics out there and quotes in relation to burnout and what organizations can do in relation to burnout. And there's also so many low or no cost things organizations can do in relation to support well-being. So I would say just tapping an executive, making sure they really understand, and you know, yeah, and that was kind of all I had. Yeah,
I would say, honestly, Zachary, there's some compelling stats out there around innovation, around profitability, around building cultures, great cultures in organizations. There's nothing more compelling than, you know, appealing to what they might be leaving on the table, right? So we use a lot of stats in our work. I think the other thing, one of my favorite things to do is surveys. So it's surveying the employees and let the employees drive that conversation. So if the results are, you know, if you get pretty bad survey results from employees, that is a bit of a wake-up call with that leadership team to say, hey, you know, ideally you want to make sure you're going to do something about it. So don't do a DEI survey unless you're willing to do something about it. But if the leadership team is willing to take a look, do a little bit of a benchmark, that is a great way to kind of get real. This is what's really going on, and let's look at our turnover. And yeah.
Christine, can I add something there? Because I love that question, Zach, too. And I feel like so many leaders have heard this over and over and over and over, that they know it helps with revenue within a company, but a lot of this stuff is still not done. And I think it's, at least in my opinion, there's two things that we don't talk enough about, is knowing who you're speaking to when you're going to leadership, because sometimes it's not the revenue. Maybe the CEO cares about that, but maybe you're talking to the HR person, you're talking to the talent person, or whatever it may be. Just making sure that you're talking to them from the perspective of what they care about. And then, you know, to Christine and Claire's point, is getting people that are kind of on your side and coming together and doing it versus you complaining. Because a lot of times people will be the squeaky wheel and they'll just complain, and then you look like the negative seed, because often people will, you know, kind of complain about things, but they come with complaints, not solutions. So maybe if you go and you say, hey, so-and-so, I know that this is really important to you, and this is how diversity can help, and here's some solutions of how we can implement these things. I think sometimes when you come to the table with some solutions, even if they're not perfect, you at least don't look like you're just the squeaky wheel complaining. I think that often helps with leadership as well.
Yeah, love that. Good stuff. Good. All right. Well, I know we are at the top of the hour. So a couple things. We do have some resources that we would be happy to make available. Reviewing job descriptions. How do you look at job descriptions to make sure that they are DEIB friendly, and an overall checklist for you as well, a DEI checklist that our team has put together. So happy to make those available. And then you are all invited. TriNet does an extraordinary conference every year. We bring in just real game changer leaders from all around the world to speak at our conference. It's a 2-day conference, and you can find out, get your free ticket. It's free, no charge, and the information is there at the bottom. And then finally, if you're interested in learning more about TriNet, Maria was on the phone with us just a minute ago, but she is our contact. If you want to find out more, we are offering for new clients that sign up, they will have free access to the work that Claire and I do for 6 months. So if that's something you're interested in, you can talk to Maria and see if your company would qualify. And
thank you, Christine and Claire. I'm still here.
You're still here. I love it.
Yes, and the whole idea of this session was we become like a big family down here in South Florida, and it was just to create like a comfortable environment for us to talk about such an important topic for all of the people that are members of Tech Hub, and provide you with the tools to actually improve the culture and also make the work environment better. So I can't wait to hear how this session has impacted you, and what have you been able to implement. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. I'll be happy to answer any questions for you.
Super.
Awesome.
All right, back to you, Nikki. You going to close us out?
Sure. So just thank you both, Christine, Claire, Maria, everybody from the TriNet team. You guys have been great partners. So I'm hoping that this was really helpful for everybody that attended. And again, we did record. So if anybody wants to go back, listen to something particular, maybe miss something, we will be resharing this out on our YouTube page and then through social. And then of course, TriNet team, I don't know if you guys have, you know, one pager or even the slide or any links. I'm happy to send a follow-up email, even to those that may have missed it, that RSVP'd in Eventbrite. I'm happy to do a follow-up there too. So thank you for everybody that attended and all your great questions, and hopefully we'll see you guys soon.
Have a great day. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Take care.
Bye.